love to introduce our three panelists that we've got here today. So I'll introduce each of them and let them tell you a bit more about who they are and really what they do. So starting with you, Dr. Kirk Malloy, can you introduce yourself to the group and tell us more about what you do?
Sure, Diana. Thanks for having me, you guys. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. I spent the bulk of my career in the last decade at Illumina, as did one of our other panelists. But came from a marine biology background and graduate school experience in an academic position, but have been in biotech commercial leadership roles for about 25 years. And the last few years, I've been primarily a consultant and served on boards of directors for everything from private venture-backed tools companies to public companies that have $100 million in revenue and everything in between. The company I think I'll spend most of the time talking about today is a forensics genomics company that was spun out of Illumina. It was part of my old business. And it uses next generation sequencing to facilitate law enforcement and crime scene investigations to identify suspects for violent crimes and recover remains from disasters.
Great, thank you for sharing. And that sounds really, I'd love to hear more about some of the broad different organizations you're working with, but thank you for highlighting that one as one you particularly want to highlight today. Dr. Julie Collins, could you introduce yourself to the group, please?
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Julie Collins. My background is that I did my undergrad at the University of Calgary in Canada in plant sciences, and then I did a PhD similar to Kirk. I kind of took a marine biology detour, and I actually worked on population genetics of kelp for my PhD, and then went to the dark side. I was an investment bank at an investment for a while doing stock analyst. So I was covering companies that were either developing technology to read genetic information or that were taking genetic information and turning it into diagnostics. And then I had an opportunity. So Illumina was one of the companies that was actually on the list that we covered. And I had an opportunity to come to Illumina marketing role. And I held a couple different roles at Illumina. The first one was doing whole genome sequencing as a service in marketing, and the second was doing market development for complex disease. So essentially I was looking for areas of healthcare and research where genomics could be applied but hadn't traditionally been applied, and tried to accelerate the adoption in those areas. And I was at Illumina for about 5 or 6 years, and then decided to start my own company, Vivid Genomics. And at Vivid Genomics, we are pursuing precision medicine for neurodegenerative disease and looking for ways of stratifying patients for clinical trials so that we can increase the chances that drug developers will be successful, so that their trials will be successful and the drugs will be approved. And the way that we're doing that is by incorporating big data, genomics, and machine learning to make the most out of the information that we have available to us.
Perfect, thank you for sharing. And then finally we have Meredith Wesley, who is a University of San Diego alum. So really glad that she can join us as well.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. Yeah, really happy to be here as a USD alum. And I will say, if you told me back in the day when I was a communications major at USD that I'd be sitting on a panel of executives in biotech, I would have probably thought you were crazy. So I'll definitely get into a little bit more about my career journey, but that's just a short way of saying if you don't know what you want to do right now, don't worry about it. But we'll talk about that. What I do currently is I head up human resources at a company called Boundless Bio here in San Diego. And what Boundless Bio does is we're a next generation precision medicine company, a precision oncology company. And originally our scientific founders discovered that many gene amplifications in cancer patients occur on what's called ecDNA, or extrachromosomal DNA. And while we've known about ecDNA, or scientists have known about ecDNA for a long time, nobody's ever really looked at that of why there's such high gene amplification residing on that ecDNA. So we're looking at really exploring and interrogating that as a way of fighting cancer. So it's a brand new technology. We're an early phase startup company, and doing some really exciting science here. So happy to share a little bit more, but that's in my current role right now. So thanks for having me.
Great, thank you, Meredith. And I really identify with what you said about, thinking back to when you were a student and not being able to predict how you got to where you are now and being on an executives in biotechnology panel. So maybe you can kick us off with my next question to the panel, which is, could you share more about your career path and how that took you to the role that you are now?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to be pretty succinct about this, because, as I mentioned, I was a communications major, a business minor. I internship with completely different advertising, PR agencies. That was really the route that I wanted to go. Back then, I think it's changed a little bit now, but back then, none of us in HR intended to be in HR. We all kind of accidentally ended up in HR. But I think now there's so much more in the field that you can really focus on, again, culture, talent, really cool organizational development things. Back then, it wasn't quite as glamorous, but I started off in staffing and recruiting, and that's where I really got my start. And then I went in-house to work as more of a generalist. And the cool thing about HR is you can do that across so many different industries. So I was in, for most of the start in HR in Orange County, working in kind of the high-tech telecom, IT back in the .com days. And that was really exciting. And then I got really lucky when so it was about 14 years ago, I was looking to move back to San Diego. And I took a job, it was my first job in life sciences with a pharmaceutical company called Santaris. And we were a later stage commercial company at the time, still relatively small, but we had approved products and a commercial sales force. And then we had some later stage development drugs. And I'm so grateful and thankful that they took a chance on me, not having that specific industry experience, but still doing HR. And I just got tremendous experience with that. And we had a nice long run there. And then, as what often happens in biotech is we got acquired by another company. And so then I really quickly got very lucky again and transitioned to a company called Ignita here in San Diego, where I joined as their first person heading up HR. We had about 20 employees at the time. And Ignita was developing precision oncology along with companion diagnostics. And we got up to about 120 employees. And then we got acquired by a large company called Roche and Genentech. And that was really good for, it was really a great exit for us, primarily because we had developed a therapeutic and gotten it to the point where we were going to submit it for approval. And it was doing really great things for a rare subset of cancer patients. And we knew a big company like Roche was going to have more success getting it across the finish line and certainly getting it to patients, because that's what they do. And they were going to be more successful at that than us. So that was a really good thing for patients. It meant that 120 of us then went out to do other things, which happens in San Diego biotech. You've got these great people with great experience and they go form new companies. And so I happily followed two of my executives. I was doing some consulting with them to start, but then former CEO and COO started Boundless Bio, and I joined them as employee number 5 last year when we completed our Series A financing. So we're back to kind of a ground floor. We're a really early stage company, and back to a ground floor. So I would say, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I've been really lucky about just being with really good people and really smart people. And I feel really lucky that I'm not a scientist by any means, but I really can still have an impact as we're talking about hiring the right people, as we're talking about building a company that's really mission driven with a good culture where people want to work every day. And I just feel really fortunate that I get to be a part of this industry. So really lucky with that.
Thank you, Meredith, and I appreciate having representation on this panel from both the non-technical side and the technical side as executives. So that brings segues perfectly on to Julie. Could you share a bit more about your career path and being more on that technical side and how that's brought you to the role you have today?
Yeah, I mean, I'll also say that I had no idea what I was going to do when I was an undergrad. I knew that the really passionate about that I've been passionate about it since high school is genomics and genetics. And I mean, I think the math of it is beautiful. There's like so many different applications. There's so much information in it. I love it. So I knew that there would be some element of genomics in my future, but I didn't know exactly how. So when I graduated, I knew for sure that I wanted to go to grad school because I just need, if you want to go into a scientific career, you kind of have to do that. Otherwise you sort of stunt out a little bit early. So I did my at the University of Chicago. And the intent for students that are in the program that I was in is really that they're going to take academic roles. And I got, partway through and I was like, man, I did not envision doing academics long-term. This is not my deal. So, there were things that again, that I absolutely loved, but where it just felt like, you can work on a project that's pretty specific, and if you're broadly interested in science, you can use some of that. And I didn't like how long everything took. It just felt like the timeline for everything was just extremely drawn out. So I did a lot of career research, and I totally appreciate the roles that you have at USD in providing that as a service, because I leaned on that really heavily finishing up. So I had read a book that I always recommend to people if you're interested in careers in science, because they are so broad. It's a book called Beyond the Ivory Tower. And it's a book that has a bunch of different chapters that talk about different, it's kind of like each chapter is a person and they've got a job in some scientific thing. They might be an IP attorney, they might be a stock analyst, they might be a curator at a museum. There are a bunch of different things. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out like what felt right for me. And I've always been interested in business, and I've always just kind of had an interest in the stock market. So I was like, yeah, I could cover these companies where you need to have a technical understanding to really be able to vet what their opportunity is and what their likelihood of adoption is. And I just like the timeline of it. I mean, we used to laugh when I was an analyst that talking to our trader was like bull riding. Like if you had a conversation that was longer than 8 seconds, it was like pretty miraculous. So it was a fun job. I liked it. It was a ton of work. It was like 12-hour days. And the bank that I was working at was actually in the Midwest in Milwaukee. And I wanted to be involved more in I wanted a community of other biotech people. And so I knew that Milwaukee was not going to be my home long-term. So I was looking for opportunities that were either in Boston or in the Bay Area or San Diego. And I was really fortunate based on the role that I had really strong connections with people at these genomics companies. And I had an opportunity to go to Illumina then. And, as an analyst, you're kind of watching everybody else's party from the outside, and you're, making calls on what you think they're going to do. What I really wanted to do was be involved in devising the strategy and executing the strategy. So that's what I got to do at Illumina. When my initial role was strategic, it was like, let's accelerate the adoption of whole genome sequencing so that when we launch these instruments that can do $1,000 genome, that people aren't just like, well, what am I going to do with this? That they knew. So once we launched those instruments, then I had an opportunity to go into a different role, which was this market development. And it was more to my population genetics background. And so I was speaking with customers who were essentially doing, broad things, but kind of related to population genetics in different disease areas. And, I was on the research side, you can kind of treat all of these different diseases in a pretty similar way. Like the methods, it's like RNA-seq and GWAS studies and whole genome sequencing for rare components. And You know, and that sort of works from a very high level on research side, but for going into a specific disease area in healthcare, it has to be like much more focused. It has to be like, you know, well, who are the clinicians treating this, and how are they treating patients today? And are there diagnostics? Are there drugs that are available? Like, what are the challenges within that disease area? And so I was looking for something that had specific, you know, like a heavy genomics component where genomics could actually make a difference in that disease area, and something that had a really high unmet need. And there was obviously an understanding that genomics makes a difference and can be applied and used in cancer, but less of a widespread understanding that that could also be true in other common diseases, common chronic diseases. So I was looking for a disease area that had really high heritability, high genetic component, and unmet need, and neurodegenerative diseases and Alzheimer's just completely jumped off the page. And I was like, why aren't we doing this? This is a huge opportunity. And there's like so much, we can make so much difference, right? Like that was coming from like it's fun. I'll tell you, like being outside and doing field work is a good time, but like actually taking that sort of esoteric knowledge and like turning it into something where you can help people, right? Where there's like, you know, and I personally find Alzheimer's and dementia is just devastating. It's just to me. So the idea that I could actually like make that difference was a huge driver, and it was a big business opportunity as well. And so I was trying to get attention for that within Illumina. And I had actually reported to Kirk for a while, and I think if Kirk had still been there, I probably could have made a better case. But there had just been a lot of transition. It was hard to get attention on it. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to have to go do this on my own. I believe this much in it, and I think this is a huge opportunity. I'm just going to go do it. So I took that leap and started Genomics about 3 years ago. So yeah, maybe I'll stop there. I feel like that kind of brings us up to speed in my career.
That's great, Julie, and I appreciate you sharing kind of that, what that decision process was like that prompted you to move on from Illumina and really, you know, invest in doing your own thing, being part of Vivid Genomics. And I appreciate the book recommendation that you gave as well. I put the link in the chat so students could look into that more. So Kirk, I see a lot of parallels with you and Julie, and kind of starting off your careers with graduate studies and then spending time in Illumina. But could you share a bit more about what your career journey has looked like?
Sure. Unlike Meredith and Julie, I very arrogantly thought I knew exactly what I wanted to do from a very young age. I wanted to be Jacques Cousteau and be a marine biologist and have a lab and be a teacher. So I was very laser focused. I went to the University of Miami. I got a double major in biology and marine science and a double minor, and I published papers before I graduated. I was very academic sort of focused. Went to the University of Delaware and did a PhD and master's frankly in fisheries ecology. And at the time, molecular biology was this new toy, and was lucky enough to go to Woods Hole for a summer course in marine molecular biology. And we basically spent 2 months cloning a single gene from a shark liver. Actually, was making a library from a shark liver. We didn't even clone a gene. We just made a cDNA library. So that was, you know, a huge project back then. And I'll just tell you one really quick, funny story. I felt very out of my element because I was an ecologist and I was surrounded by all of these biochemists and molecular biologists. But we had been dropped at a marine lab to do this library on a shark liver. And so we were all standing around this tank with sharks swimming around, waiting for the professor to show up. And in our little lab coats and with our goggles. And I sort of said, what are we waiting for? And they said, oh, well, we're waiting for the professor to come and, you know, dissect this shark. And so I reached in the tank and grabbed a shark and pithed it, cut it open and said, what organ do you need? And their eyes got huge and they were like, oh my God. So from day one, I had credibility with all these biochemists who I was terrified of. So that was an interesting pivot in my career. But anyway, finished my PhD. I went to Boston to do a postdoc. I did 2 postdocs and actually had graduate students in a lab and pretty well funded. And my family needed to move to California. And I went kicking and screaming to California, where I was going to be the only breadwinner. And so I took a job that I didn't want and I didn't think I was qualified for, to be in a technical support role at QIAGEN, which at the time was they sell DNA RNA purification products during the Human Genome Project. They had just gone public. They had just opened a North American operation. And all I could think is I spent all this time in school to sit in a cubicle with a headset and get yelled at by angry customers. And it just wasn't what I expected. But after the first day at work, I knew I was going to love it because I got to teach 20 times a day. I got to learn all these business skills. I got to troubleshoot without having to stand at a lab bench for 8 hours a day. And I got to interact with people all day long, even though it was on the phone. And so really found my passion for teaching and training and business strategy, and was lucky enough to be at a couple of very fast-growing companies where they invested in their employees and taught you how to be a manager and all of that. So spent several years at QIAGEN, moved to San Diego to a diagnostics company called Biotechnology, where I learned, frankly, cut my teeth on diagnostics. And they had a point-of-care bedside test for heart attacks. Spent a lot of time in emergency rooms and talking to pathologists and trying to convince cardiologists I knew more about myocardial infarction than they did, which is a very interesting thing to do. Cardiologists tend to think a lot of themselves and they're hard to teach. Jay Flatley, the CEO at Illumina, had just decided he needed to build his own commercial team. So I joined Illumina when the company was about 100 people and had no revenue and about 6 months of money in the bank. And so every one of my career decisions after my academic career was a huge risk. But every single one of those amplified my abilities and my success tenfold. So I just tell the students, even though you think you know what you want to do, you don't. And even though the next job or the next opportunity you have sounds nothing like what you want to do, it may be the best thing you ever decided to do. So I was really lucky at Illumina. I was able to ride that wave for 13 years from basically a frontline position, traveling the world, doing installations and customer training, until the last few years when I was running $1 billion business. So I'll spare you the middle piece, but you can imagine there was lots of personal growth, failures, and lessons learned through that whole thing. Since leaving Illumina, I've been really fortunate to be able to work with a number of really interesting companies in the genomic space, mostly in the tools space. And so I love working with the executives at these companies because you get to be part of the strategy. You get to really learn about different market verticals, as I said, forensics, oncology, just tools and library prep. I'm on a board of a company that makes LED lights for instrumentation. So you just never know where these things are going to take you. And as I said, I guess my primary company is this company called Verigen, which uses next generation sequencing for genealogy and crime lab analysis and forensic analysis. And very briefly, the advantage is this old-fashioned technology has been used for 30 or 40 years to do DNA fingerprinting, and all these crime lab and rape kit analysis is being replaced hopefully quickly by next generation sequencing, where you get much higher resolution, a much higher confidence level to identify individuals, but you also get phenotypic data. So you can identify hair color, eye color, ethnicity, height, and you can use these big databases like 23andMe in genealogy to find second and third order relatives of an unknown sample that may not be in an FBI database. So if you've heard of the Golden State Killer case in Northern California, they used our technology and the genealogy database that our company owns to find that person and narrow the suspects down. So I'm sure we can talk about that a lot longer.
Thanks for sharing, Kirk. I love hearing about some of those applications of the science that you're working on. So love that. My next question is a slight change in tone, and I'd love to hear more about what type of roles and positions that each of your organizations hire for. So we'll start again with Meredith, and you can speak to that from the human resources perspective.
Yeah, great, thanks. So again, we are a small company. Because we're just starting off in really early stage discovery. So we've got about 30 employees right now, and I'd say about 75% of them are lab-based employees. And then we've got a handful of just bioinformatics and other, of course, finance and IT positions to support that. So we do have scientists as well as research associates. I think as we continue to grow, we're going to fill in all different kinds of areas. So as you take a therapeutic further down the drug development stage, then you need different talents at that time. I think it's probably more helpful maybe to just talk about, because I think we'll have a variety of positions as we go down, but certainly lab-based positions are the majority. But I think what I would say, what we would look for in no matter what the position is we look for people who are comfortable in that small company environment. As you start to interview with companies, and Kirk and Julie have talked a little bit about that, there's not a right or wrong with big company or small company, but they are really different. So a large company, you're going to be able to get really, really deep expertise in your particular area, and there's great, as Kirk said, there's great training programs and investments, but you tend to specialize in one area and go really deep. A smaller company, you've got really broad experience because it is you're doing a little bit of everything. And so we like to find people who are really comfortable with a little ambiguity. Obviously, we've got some defined roles and responsibilities, but that could change in a couple of weeks. And so you've got to be really comfortable with that kind of ambiguity, shifting roles. You've got to be comfortable with some risk tolerance as well too. We don't know if this is going to work. We certainly hope so, and we're doing everything we can to de-risk it. But just in this industry, things go well, things don't. It's science, right? I mean, so you can't predict how it's going to go. What you want to do is make sure you're with a good team, so if the science isn't working out, that there's good contingency plans or different things that you can shift. But you have to be really comfortable in this industry. I think big company or small company, just knowing there's going to be ups and downs, and you worry about what you can control, and not so much about what you can't control. Otherwise, you won't be able to sleep at night. So I'd say we are looking for people who are really excited about the science and working on something new. People who are really passionate and excited about it. We're looking for people who are willing to just help wherever's needed. Definitely rolling up their sleeves at every level. I'm a one-person department, so sometimes I'm working on things with our board of directors on one minute, and the other minute I'm entering somebody into our benefits database or doing my own filing. I mean, so it runs the gamut for us. So we really look at people who are comfortable. They can think high level and see the big picture, but they're comfortable getting their hands really dirty and doing the work as well. And we were really intentional with picking out our values very early. Part of our culture will be more organic as we grow, but we were really intentional about some of our values of just being bold. So boldness is one, compassion is another, commitment is another. So we tend to, in our interview process, be able to try to uncover people that really are aligned with our values, that our values really resonate, because it's more than just a sign on the wall. That's how we're going to make our decisions. We're going to use those values. That's how we're going to interact with each other. That's how we're going to behave with each other in the good times and in the bad times. So we kind of look for that, kind of bringing your whole self to work, because I think there'll be a variety of positions, and absolutely the roles and responsibilities are key. But there's more to that too, to make sure that somebody's going to be successful in the company, and that they're going to be happy in the company as well too. So hopefully that answers the question.
Well, that's great, Meredith. And really appreciate what you said, not only about looking for people who really align with those company values, but also that being comfortable with kind of ambiguity. That's such an important skill. So, Julie, same question for you. In what type of what type of positions does your organization hire for, and what are you really looking for when deciding to bring someone onto your team?
Yeah, so we're also a really small team, so I'll answer that in kind of broad categories of roles that we will hire for. So we are data analytics, so we will, I don't foresee in the next 3 years having a wet lab component to what we're doing. Primarily, we're bringing in existing data sets or working with collaborators to bring those in. So the sort of major areas are, you know, methods development, analytics, data science on the research side, and then more also bioinformatics, but more you know, rigorous software development, so that we're taking those algorithms and those tools that we've developed on the analysis side, and then turning those into something that we can actually make into a product. And so those are slightly different roles. When people talk about like R&D, they're talking about research, which is a little bit more like rough, and then development, which is like, okay, we have this thing that was kind of rough, but now we've got to make it super rock solid. So those are sort of two general areas. Another, because part of our strategy is also building this data asset and bringing in data sets or generating data externally and then being able to use it. There's a role that, you know, of business development, where we need somebody that has technical expertise and kind of can understand like why we want different data sets and what they should be composed of and what the quality is, but also know how to, you know, work in negotiating and understanding like what does the structure of that agreement look like, so that we can actually use the data for what we want. And so that person would be interacting with legal teams external to be able to, you know, make sure that that's usable and future-proof it for us. We also have a marketing arm that we're going to develop and build out. And so marketing can either mean like, you know, making really cool pictures so that people sort of understand visually what it is you're trying to accomplish, or it can be like, what does the market want, and going out and having conversations with customers so that you're actually building something that someone wants, right? Like someone once said to me, like, you know, scientists can kind of go down this path where they're like, look, I made this really awesome zipper calculator. You can put there's a zipper on your calculator. It's like, yeah, but who wants that? So, you know, you want to make sure that the thing that you're developing actually meets the requirements that are needed. And then you can also understand like, well, what's this thing going to be worth to somebody, and how much will I be able to sell it for? So, and that sort of segment of marketing is called product marketing. So that's kind of where, you know, the sort of like big categories, I guess, of what we'll hire for. You know, I absolutely agree with Meredith that you want to bring in people that understand like, look, we could be doing anything today or tomorrow. Like, you know, you got to have that flexibility and sort of that, you know, I describe it as being like, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Like you got to know that you're not going to know everything, but from, you know, the thing that I'd say like the two major culture components that are really, really critical and important to me are, you know, find the expert, like be collaborative, go out, figure out who it is that you need to work with, and then build those relationships so that you can get the information that you need and that you've got this back and forth. Like that to me is like, no one knows everything. And if you have that, you'll get the information that you need and you'll be able to figure it out. So that's, you know, the first part that's really critical. The other, which I think is critical in like any company, whether it's a big company or small company, is communication, right? Like, are you honest about what's going on? Are you, you know, being forthcoming about like, here's the challenges, or here's what I see as an opportunity, and here's who I need to work with. And, you know, you can really accelerate things, or it can kind of stunt things out. So, you know, those are sort of like the two intangible things. So those aren't like, okay, you know, do you have experience in Python and, you know, all these different coding languages, but like, you've got to have that. If you don't have that, then it's just really hard to make the most of the skill set that someone does have.
Thank you, Julie. And that's something which I hear daily from employers on communication being one of the skills that they're most looking for, no matter what major, what position. So I appreciate hearing that from you as well. And then finally, Kirk, same question to you. What type of roles do you look for in the organization, and what are you really looking for when you bring someone on to join your team?
Yeah, Julie and Meredith really covered it well, particularly for the small companies. So maybe what I can do is speak to some of the intangibles that are universally important in at least this industry, and maybe a little bit of a high level architecture of a big company, which is a lot different than the startup companies that they talked about. I think on the intangibles, I'll follow up what Julie said, the communication, and it's not just you know, being a good interviewee, but you need to be able to really articulate complicated, you know, concepts, and you need to be able to make a pitch and be a good salesperson, and you need to be able to listen. And these sound really basic, but you don't learn them in a book. and you'll lose jobs or you'll be unsuccessful sometimes because of them. In fact, when I was an undergraduate, I took a public speaking class and forced myself to be a tour guide on campus because I knew I'd be giving lectures and have to, be standing in front of a bunch of people. And in graduate school, we used to have to give a seminar and go to international meetings at least twice a year. And I have given a lot of graduation speeches where I said that single skill is way more important. The public speaking, the ability to think on your feet, the ability to handle criticism gracefully and constructively, way more important than anything I learned on the bench or anything I learned in a classroom. And so don't underestimate the value of those skills when you're looking for a job. I think the second thing intangible is culture. And that word is thrown around a lot, but you need to know yourself. Do you like a fast-paced environment where you're going to be left to your own decision-making? Do you like a lot of structure where you have very clear goals and milestones and you feel reassured that you're making progress? What kind of person do you want to work for? Someone who's very collaborative and involved, or someone who leaves you alone? These are really important intangible things in every job that you need to think about that you don't really learn about in class or even in graduate school. At a big company, Julie really covered a lot of the kind of core functions, but there's a couple basic types of jobs. There's research jobs, which you can be a bachelor's through PhD, and you can be an R&D. And you're usually at the bench or working with people at the bench doing science. You're doing experiments, you're looking at data. Bioinformatics is very hot right now. It's cyclical, but very high paying. If you're good at math and you like genomics, you're going to make a lot of money, and there's a lot of really interesting applications for that. There was a period of time after the Human Genome Project where they couldn't find jobs, and now I think you can't find a good bioinformatician for less than a couple $100,000 a year. So there's a variety even with R&D. You can be a chemist, you can be a biologist, you can be a molecular biologist, you can be a bioinformatician. And these are the people generally making the products or inventing the products or developing them for commercialization. Then there's the commercial group, which Julie talked a bit about. There's people in sales. There's what I did, which is service and support. And there's marketing. Really depends on your personality. At some point, as Julie said, you need to have the basic technical skills in the domain that you're working in. But if you want to be out traveling and teaching customers, that's a very different job than going out and selling. There's very few scientists have the right personality to be salespeople. Very few salespeople have the technical background to be successful. And so if you're one of those lucky few that enjoys, selling and helping people with their science, and you're money motivated and you like goals, then that's a good job for you. If you like solving problems and teaching, maybe service support or marketing, where you're trying to decide what the right product is for the right customer, or you're trying to, help with promotions and advertising. And the last piece is operations, which doesn't get a lot of glory, but once you have a product and customers, it becomes really important. Manufacturing, quality control, all the things that go into making these complicated products and making sure they work is really important. So if you have a degree or a background in operations or manufacturing or quality, you're a really important part of these organizations. And maybe you prefer working, in the back office and looking at data and making sure things are really right and perfect and hitting deadlines. And in that case, maybe that's more of a job for you. So I think it's important. When I was going through school, I only thought about an academic career. I wish I had known about industry. I wish I had talked to people in industry and realized all of the different jobs that exist with a technical background, because it took me a long time to figure that out. If I'd known it earlier, I probably would have jumped into industry sooner.
Well, thank you, Kirk. And that segues beautifully onto one of my final questions, really for you and Julie, on how do you see academia, medicine, and biotechnology industry overlapping one another? And what do you see as the distinctions between the three? So either you or Julie, whoever wants to speak to that first.
You want me to take it? Okay, so academia, industry, and to me, medicine feels the most distinct of those three, where you're dealing with patients. The training is so different. So it's hard for me to answer this in a non-biased way, but when you're trained as a medical professional, it's like, here's what's been done so far. This is what's worked. You should do this thing that has worked so far. And it is like, it's linear. you know, here are the drugs that have been approved. This is one that you prescribed. This is the diagnostic that is for this person in this age range, in this condition. This is what you do. And academia is so different from that, right? It's like, oh, I thought of this crazy thing that I don't think anyone else has ever thought of. And I'm curious about how it works because I've seen these other things and, you know, in a totally random, different, you know, segment of the world. And I think that it might apply here and I'm going to test it. And it's so much more, there's so much more uncertainty and you know, this is my biased word, creativity, right? You're just like, well, how can you imagine what could come together? And you're taking these really disparate pieces and you're like moving knowledge forward. And, you know, and so academia can be a very, you know, esoteric, you know, something that is not often used in an application, and that's perfectly fine. Some people want their studies or the things that they discover to be used, and I think that that's where the sort of like overlap with industry takes place. So if you want to sell something and you want something to be used by a broad swath of people, or you want to understand like how it's going to change the world like tangibly, then that's sort of where industry comes in. And I think that you know, again, I think it just sort of, some of it's just like, what is your personality type and what's your preference and what just feels more right to you in those, you know, in each of those three things. I'm going to throw that over the fence to Kirk. So yeah, curious to hear your perspective on this.
Actually, I thought that was a really good answer. You know, medicine is following the guidelines and what we know is true. Academia is high risk, you know, very creative entrepreneurial exploration and science. And industry, you know, to be honest with you, is trying to monetize both of those.
That's beautifully put, Kirk. Thank you, and thank you, Julie. So the final short question, because I want to make sure that students have enough time to ask you their questions. But we could say give 30-second piece of advice on what you wish you knew as a student that you would like to share with our undergraduate students. So start off with Meredith, please.
Okay, great. Well, I think we covered it. Don't on one sentence. Don't worry if you don't know what you want to do. I always think that internships are a great thing, and I think they're a great thing to find out what you don't want to do as much as what you do want to do. So I encourage you to do that. The other thing I would say that I think is so important is what I have learned is, again, I've gotten really lucky by being with really good people and just following good leaders, because the business goes up and down, the science goes up and down, the markets go up and down, but just be with really strong leaders. And when you're first starting out, it's really hard, right? I mean, you've got to pay the bills. You can't be that picky. You need a job. And so take that job, get everything that you can out of it. If it's not ultimately a place where you feel like really aligned with kind of the leadership and the company, do the best job you can do so you get glowing references, no matter where you are. It's a small town, and really work on the next job you take to be with really strong leaders. And I think that is so, I think that's so important. And you don't always get the opportunity, but I think it's really important to show up, do your best job that you can, even if it's not your ideal job. Make sure that you're going to get a glowing recommendation when you go. And also, soak up what you can. And it's okay if that's not going to be a fit for you for the long haul. And then I think you just look for people with again, with the culture that you're aligned with, and leaders with high integrity, leaders who care about doing, not only being smart business people, but again, I think caring about the overall mission, and then caring about the employees. So it's hard to find. It's not easy, but as you're going up in your career, I think it's just important to look at that. So I would say that's looking back, that's one thing that I think, quite honestly, I think I got lucky on it until I figured it out. It did not start off that way. It definitely did not start off that way. And it took me a while to find it. And so, so that's okay. Just soak it up. And I think Kirk had made the point that any experience is really going to be good experience, and you might you're going to take something from it, you're going to learn something from it, and so just be open. So that would be my advice.
Thanks, Meredith, and I'm sure that's reassuring to many students listening on the call. So, Julie, in a nutshell, what piece of advice would you give to students that you wish you knew as an undergraduate?
Yeah, I actually want to say something that's upstream of what Meredith said, and then something that's downstream of what Meredith said. So upstream, people are really generous with their time, and I didn't know that there was this thing called informational interviews, right? Where you can just reach out to someone and say, hey, you know, you've got this job that I think is kind of interesting, or I don't know that much about it, but your background kind of looks like mine, or I think I want to do what you're doing in the future. Can I talk to you for 15 minutes, right? And people are willing to take those calls, and so few people actually do and reach out that as an undergrad, if you do that, you will immediately stand out, right? And if you want to have a conversation with me, I'm happy to do it. And, you know, if we have a call and I'm like, I want to do, and I actually don't do that thing, but I have a friend and you should talk to this. That's how it works, right? That's what the networking is. And I think that honestly, that's the best way to get an internship, because a lot of places don't advertise their internships. And frankly, they don't even advertise their jobs, right? So it's networking is so much. So and then Meredith made the point about internships are a great way to learn, like to actually, then you're doing it and you're like, oh, I thought I liked this thing and I don't, or this is actually great. And now you know exactly what's going to be critical for me. When you're in an internship, imagine the letter that you want someone to write when you're done. I want my letter to look like this, and then do all that stuff and tell the person that you're doing the internship with that, like, what you want to get out of it, and this is the letter you want at the end, and like write that letter up front, and then make sure you've hit all those check all those boxes, because you should, you know, that's a huge opportunity to say, like, hey, I did this thing, I provided a lot of value, this was what it was like, you know, to work with me, and then that gives you a lot of opportunity going forward as well.
Great, thank you, Julie. And Katie's just shared in the chat some resources that we have as a Career Development Center on informational interviewing and LinkedIn networking, because knowing the strength of the USD alumni community, I'm sure there'd be many alums there who'd be happy for you to reach out as students and say, you work in a field that they might be interested in, would love to buy you a virtual coffee or jump on a Zoom call, whatever that looks like, and learn more. So thanks, Julie. And then finally, Kirk, what's your kind of, in a nutshell, piece of advice that you would like to give students?
It's very similar to Julie's. I guess it would just be to be fearless and to manage your own career. Because although you may now be aware that these informational interviews exist, 90% of you aren't going to do it. You're going to wait to look for a job. You're going to wait for someone to offer you a job. And like Julie said, if you just take ownership of your own trajectory and you go out and find 10 people and just ask them questions about the jobs that they do, you immediately have a network you wouldn't have had, and you are much more informed about what kind of job you want, and you won't go through so many jobs you don't want. So Julie gave a great example of one of those tools, but you know, I always assumed when I was kind of coming up that, you know, I would just do this job and then the next job, and I would wait for the right job. And I never had the guts or the proactivity to just pick up the phone and call 10 people and ask them to have a coffee. And it's a complete game changer for your entire career perspective and trajectory. You should be spending time doing that, you know, every week or month. You should be talking to somebody new. And 9 times out of 10, they won't go anywhere, and you'll learn that you don't want to do something. But that 10th time will set your path completely in a different direction.
Thank you, Kirk, and great final advice from each of our panelists. So speaking of being fearless, who wants to be fearless and unmute themselves to ask a question to one of our panelists? And if you can either direct it to all 3 of them, or if there is one that you particularly want to ask a question to, just mention which panelist you'd like to direct that to.
Nobody's taking my fearless advice.
Are any of the companies you guys are working for hiring for interns anytime soon?
There's a fearless one.
Yeah.
You should be in sales, whoever that was.
Yeah. I can answer that. So So we did not have plans this summer because we were so new and just getting started. And then of course, COVID put a huge wrench in to a lot of companies' plans. We certainly would like to, so please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or connect with me. We haven't made set plans because we're already running out of our space and we have to figure out some facility things first. But it's certainly our intention and we would certainly like to.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'll go next. We don't have anything that's specifically defined. I'm not like running out trying to find an intern for something, but yeah, I mean, it kind of goes both ways, right? Like if you have an informational interview with somebody and suddenly I'm like, oh, wow, you're really interested in this thing that I needed some help with and I never would have written a job description for it, but like, sure, let's set something up. Yeah, I mean, I don't have like an open position for an internship or something that's like, you know, that I know I'm going to hire for in June or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to turn down talent if it's good.
Yeah. Again, don't wait for someone to put something on a bulletin board to respond to it. Pick up the phone and introduce yourself. And, you know, it's very likely somebody needs your help. I mean, we're all under-resourced. Every company, for the most part, is under-resourced. So you're more desired and needed than you probably know, and you just have to show up and tell them what you're able to do and find a match. So I don't wait around for a posting or the career group to tell you about an internship. Go create one.
I love that. Thank you. And Wiley, thanks for that fearless question. Grant, I thought I saw you unmute yourself. Did you have a question as well? Grant Feldman.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm just got a question for all three of you. I'm just curious how COVID's kind of changed your day-to-day operations. Like I know it must vary between each company, so I'm curious about that.
I'll just a quick answer. Other than R&D, most of my companies have been virtual since March or April. To be honest with you, other than the ability to collaborate and socialize, it hasn't had a huge effect operationally on us. In fact, a lot of my companies have pivoted to COVID diagnostics and it's improved their revenue stream because there's a dearth of labs that are able to do that testing. But you know, I think you've got some logistics and some R&D people that you just have to have in the lab doing wet work. But for the most part, I haven't seen a significant impact on productivity, but we've seen a significant impact on revenue because customers aren't ordering and buying and doing the normal things to do.
Yeah, I can chime in. I am actually in my office today, so I'm very happy about that. So we are lucky, as much as I was pulling my hair out because it was a crazy thing to deal with, I kept reminding myself, we're very lucky as an early stage discovery company. We didn't have the complexities that and probably others. I can't even imagine, like in Illumina, we didn't have, we aren't in clinical trials yet, so we didn't have to worry about supply chain issues. So our lab folks really didn't miss a beat. They've been coming in the whole time. Now, we certainly put in safety procedures. The reason I'm not in a mask right now is because I have a closed office door, but everybody has masks. We've installed plexiglass. We've got a lot of new protocols, but we're a little more progressive for San Diego companies where our lab employees are coming in. With our other G&A employees, we're kind of making it voluntary. If they feel like they can be productive at home and they want to stay home, great. If they feel like because of whatever's going on at home, they'll be more productive here. We've actually put in the right safety protocols where we're okay having them here, but that's not a lot of people. So it works a little easier. I will say we've gotten a little creative too. We did all the Zoom happy hours at first, you know, once a week or once a month, and everybody got really sick of those. So now it's voluntary, but we've got an outside grass area where we spread out, and we still have masks, but you know, we'll have beer and pizza on a Friday afternoon once a month, just in doing it more safely and just trying to be creative so we can have that collaboration and those relationships that people are missing. And we feel like because we're such a small group and we're still far apart, we're still wearing the mask, that we're able to do that. But I think we've been a little more progressive than most companies that are just keeping non-essential people just strictly at home.
Yeah, and I'll say that, you know, because we're not doing lab work and we're working on data analysis, a lot of our work is done at the computer anyways. I think the biggest impact has probably been, you know, not being able to go to conferences and interact with groups of people. That has been, yeah, that's less than ideal. But I think, you know, back to the communication and collaboration, I think if you're like that way in a room, you're going to be like that in front of your computer at home. So I think as long as you've got really good people who speak to one another and stay in touch, it doesn't have a huge impact.
Perfect. So wanting to be mindful of time, I know we're at 1:33 Pacific time. Just want to say a big thank you to Kirk, Meredith, and Julie as our panelists for being here today, and just great to see so many of you as students joining us for this call. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
What I've done is put in the chat the survey that you can complete to secure those all-important CRP points, and just share some feedback with us, which will be helpful as we plan future panels and events. And then if Meredith, Kirk, and Julie, I don't know if you've got something directly after this, but if not, we'd love if you could stick around for about 5 or 10 minutes, and any students who have a chance to share their questions could be able to connect with you.
Sure. Nope.
Great, thank you. So feel free to fill in that survey and jump off the call if you've got else to go to, students, but if not, our panelists are sticking around for a few more minutes.
Hi, I'm sorry, I know we're over time, but I have like a weird, like oddly specific question. So I'm like really interested in like basically genomics and sharks, and I was just wondering if there's like any companies that like are like Illumina but that like specify in sharks, or like I don't know, that's just like my thing. I like love sharks, so I just didn't know if you guys knew anything about that.
I know a guy. So when I did my PhD, I did all of my molecular work at the Field Museum in Chicago, and the guy that runs that lab is like hardcore sharks all day long. So he is, I mean, he's like, you know, he runs a lab at a museum, studies sharks. I don't know if any companies, the only one that comes to mind, and I forget the name, maybe Meredith and Kirk, you guys remember, they've got this really long-term data from this is not sharks, from the DoD on the captive population or a captive group of dolphins. And they've got like a bunch of interesting physiological data that they're mining to understand longevity and cancer and a whole bunch of stuff that I'm like sort of blanking on right now. But yeah, I mean, if you're like interested, again, right, informational interview, if you want to have a conversation with the guy from the Field Museum and ask him what he knows about sharks, like he'll be connected for sure.
Okay, thank you. And that DoD study, I actually know kind of a little bit about that. Because SPAWAR, like, well, NAVWAR now, but they do the training with the marine mammals, like for dolphins and seals detecting mines and stuff for the government. And like, I know that like I've toured there before, but I know like the scientists there are using part of that data to help understand like their